Hi, New Catholic Generation. It's me, Renée from Reborn Pure, and I am hosting today for the first time in a long while.
Go, Renée!
It's probably been like a year. I think I did the Mother Angelica panel a long time ago. So here I am. And if you remember, we interviewed Jim Caviezel a couple weeks ago about his new movie, Paul, and now we have watched it. So we're here to give you our commentary on this film. And to start out, I want to ask what everybody thought about just the quality of the filming itself.
Well, I say my initial thoughts of the movie were, first off, I want to say I stand by what I said in the trailer as far as the concerns I had for the film. Multiple concerns there. I won't go over them again. You guys can go watch the trailer review. That being said, I love this movie. I thought it was fantastic. Some of the concerns I had were addressed in the movie, and some of them I got a new perspective on. I might not have been a fan of the trailer, and I stand by my opinion at the time. But I thought this movie was fantastic and a really good thing to see that I would highly recommend.
I thought it was a lot better than what most Christian films, especially what most biblical films are that are coming out a lot. Like Risen was all right. It kind of, for me at least, it kind of tapered towards the end. But this one, I feel, was very solid all the way through. Kept me engaged the whole time. And even though, there were aspects taken from Scripture, stuff that most people know about, they still presented it in a very engaging way and in a very, enticing and artistic way. And I really appreciated that. I think it was a good movie. Yeah.
Awesome. And then, Mark, what did you think of the movie just overall?
I'm very conflicted about this movie.
Mark is very conflicted about this movie.
Like, on the one hand, I like the writing, which Jim Caviezel, it drew him into the movie, as you said in the panel. I liked some of the shots. I thought the acting was well done. I don't know what's,
There's some sort of inner turmoil.
Yeah, there's inner turmoil about this movie that I'm just like... I'm having a hard time being like, well, did I like it? Did I not like it? Would I recommend it? I'm just like, I literally don't know about it.
He's at a stalemate with this movie.
Because I don't think it's a bad movie, and there are really good elements to it. I think, and we might go deeper into this, my biggest problem was the fact that I personally thought it was way too brutal.
It was a pretty brutal movie, that's true.
Yeah. I was surprised to find out that it was a PG-13 movie. I thought it was a rated R movie.
Interesting.
Wow, that is surprising. I didn't even know that either.
Yeah.
I mean, because The Passion was R,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, back in the day.
Well, The Passion was, there's nothing more brutal as far as Christian films go than The Passion. Mm-hmm. That's a whole other level.
Yeah.
But still, there's something about, I think it might have been just the horribleness of what these characters were going through.
Yeah, that just doesn't sit well. It disturbs you.
Yeah, it does. It kind of did disturb me because I don't need to know. It's one of those things that I know. The early church was they struggled, and that struggle has continued on to today. It was something that I was just there were some images in that movie that I kind of wish I had not seen.
I see. I understand. Yeah, I can understand
that. There's one thing hearing about it and reading about it, but it's another thing to completely see it.
There's really no heads up about it, per se.
Yeah, and we would go more into spoilers about it, but we're not supposed to. So
I understand why.
Yeah, I'm going to contrast a little bit. I think that, it makes it a little bit more real in that sense. And it's easy to argue... from say in a secular movie when movies decide to show a little bit more explicit sexual scenes or intimacy, something like that, or even more violence, they argue, well, it shows the realness of it. I think this kind of this also shows the realness of the persecution that was going on, and that for some people that's kind of the point, the studio might have made that the point of those shots because. It is one thing, like you said, to just read about it and know it happened, but another thing to see the reality of it, and that's the power behind, visual media and movies being brought to life, bringing certain stories to life. So I think there's something that's that can really make people know, whoa, that's real, and that it's still, stuff like that does happen today. That's a big connection that Jim Caviezel and Eric Groth on the panel that was filmed at Franciscan University, they shed light on that, like, yeah, like, and this is dedicated to the martyrs of today in the Middle East, the Christians that are killed today in the Middle East, you know.
A lot of it reminded me of clips or pictures I've seen of what ISIS has done recently, and it's hard for me to watch that kind of stuff. Yeah. And to kind of counter your counter, there's another level to the fact of these are real. When you're talking about it, it's completely fictional. And so there's an element of removability to that. And there's a certain aspect that I wouldn't say I'm okay with, because I'm not okay with the whole, like, sexual, like, showing that. But, or, like, people actually dying, but in fictional things, because that should never really be, like, death should never be celebrated. But here they held no bars. They kind of, like, slap you, like, within the first 5 minutes of the movie,
right,
showing the brutality of it, and it does work to its favor. I personally did not like it.
Yeah, for sure, and it's not for everyone, you know. Yeah,
yeah, it's very real, and that can draw people in and be like, wow, or it can draw some people, you know, make some people back up and go, that's a bit much.
It'll surprise people.
No, I can see how you wouldn't like, how you might, like, not exactly enjoy that sort of thing, and that's totally understandable.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think it's supposed to be enjoyed per se.
Right, exactly. But, like, I think that's the key. I think with this movie particularly, you know, I was thinking a lot about this after we watched it last night, and
it's a very thought-provoking movie.
And I really want to see it a second time, because I think a second...
Mark's like, this is not a two-timer. It's exactly what Mark said when it ended,
for
so
me,
it's funny.
I've got to see it a second time. I've got, you know, because this is such a thought-provoking thing, and just, like, I got to see it a second time. I got to get more, and just make me think about it more.
And the script is so rich, you want to hear the lines again.
The thing is, this movie, I think, in some areas, needs to be a little bit of a pullback from some things film critic perspective as far as the technical stuff goes. So in this movie, something particular, like, we had a concern in the panel of, they focused a lot on Luke's character in the trailer, but this is Paul, the Apostle of Christ. One of the things with that, you know, I'm thinking about this and watching this movie, and, like, they focused more on Paul in the actual movie than they did in the trailer. But the movie isn't titled Paul. It's titled Paul, the Apostle of Christ. And when you're talking about theology, theology is never about just the person. It's about that. It's about Christ first and foremost, and how he works through that person, and the effect that has. That is the theme that's so alive in this movie. And I can't tell you how many times. I can't give away any spoilers, but there were a few parts in this that they didn't quote what St. Paul said all the time, but there were certain scripture passages that every now and then would come into my mind of just like that's that. You know, that's this over here. They knew the story of Paul, and they integrated it so well into it. But that also means that there are some things, such as, like, oh, well, Paul isn't, like, you know, you see his face like half the time in the movie or whatever, but, like, it's like they focus a lot on Luke. Well, that's exactly the point, which I'm realizing now from my comment on the trailer, is, like, focusing on this from more of a theological perspective is how you can deeper appreciate this movie, at least from that aspect. As far as the and kind of going off of that, as far as what you're talking about, the violence, again, I totally understand. Like, you know, if that's hard to take, I think as far as rating it as an actual movie, though, I think it does make it better. I guess it didn't bother me as much, A, because I've seen The Passion enough times, B, because I did see Silence, and Silence is more brutal than this.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. Like, Silence literally shows full-fledged somebody's head getting cut off, which they completely covered in this, in Paul.
He's become desensitized to Christian ethics.
Oh my gosh. We're not getting into that. So with this movie particularly, what they are doing is, they're showing the evil that's done. One of the biggest parts in Christianity in general is through suffering, greater good comes from it. And that, that's another theme that in this movie is so richly shown. So through this terrible brutality, we find goodness, we find conversion, particularly conversion. Another point I wish I could talk about, but something that really struck me at a certain point in the movie, but just through, I think, again, understanding what you're saying also would say that doesn't necessarily objectively make the movie, make it have a flaw. I think it does objectively add to it.
Right, and it's martyrs, the blood of the martyrs are the seeds of faith,
exactly.
And that's what this movie is very much about. That's something that I feel, going back to our initial analysis of the trailer, I didn't really see that coming from the trailer. That's why I was just kind of it has Jim Caviezel, I'll watch it. I didn't really understand it was going to have that capacity and that aspect to it, to the story, but it's what made it.
Yeah, really. I got excited about a lot of I have my papers full of plus marks. I'm just recognizing this from and this connects to this, and I was excited.
Yeah, what you said was that from suffering, a lot of good can come from suffering, and that's so true. And I think in the movie, Paul, it emphasizes that point, and then it also emphasizes the point that even if there's a ton of suffering and there is no good in the foreseeable future or in the present time or in your whole lifetime, you see no good come from it, you still, as Paul said, you do not join the other side. You do not return evil for evil in any case, because there are only two sources of things. In fact, not even a source, because evil doesn't exist. We know God is existence, and good comes from him, and anything else is a lack of good. But let me talk in this way, that there are two sides here, and there's evil, there's little evils and big evils of all kinds, but they all come from the same source and the same you-know-who, etc. And then there's the good, and you never, no matter how bad it gets, want to sway and lose hope and become bitter and become despairing and fall to that other side that has been causing you so much suffering and despair your whole life anyway. You stay on the side of the good and be peaceful. And whether you bring people in during your life or you're alone your whole life, you still stand up against it, like Paul in his prison cell to his death. So that was amazing.
Yeah. That was one thing that I liked about the movie, was the fact that it showed, when you think of these characters, you think of them as saints and not necessarily as human beings.
Oh, absolutely.
And you think of them as, okay, they've already done this and they've said that they've suffered and they went through hardships, but you never really think about what that actually means.
Yeah.
And one of the times, or some of the times when they were showing the character struggles and not the physical struggles, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed Luke asking, well, why can't we do this? Because it's a real question, and it's certainly something that I have felt on a personal level. So the struggle for these characters, and I like that it showed that every single character went through that kind of struggle. Even characters that are normally happy went through that struggle and were very upset at points. Some of them to the point where their faith wavered, some of them to the point where they're just yeah, this sucks. And that was something that I did enjoy. So yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because my main two concerns, again, on the trailer discussion, were the characters of Luke and Paul. I mean, I had trust that Jim Caviezel would do a good job. One of my concerns was that, am I going to see Jesus too much and not get into the character of Luke? One of the things Jim actually said in the panel discussion, not on our video, but when he was here visiting at Franciscan University, he was asked a very similar question. He was he was asked, "Are you worried that people are going to see Jesus too much?" And he's like, "No, because you should be able to see Jesus in Luke, because you should be able to see Jesus in all Christians." Something around the lines of that.
We're at our best when we rely on Jesus and you see him in us.
Thank you. Yeah. So that was so apparent in Luke, of when he spoke to the group of Christians when they were having a conflict, and he stood up and said, "Be still," and started talking to them. It's just you see Jesus in him. And then right after that, it goes to him talking to Paul and just like what you said of like, oh, why can't we do this? You know, showing at the same time his personhood, because as much as I agree with what Jim said, you still also should be able to see the person as well. Like you see them and Jesus through them, not just Jesus. You know, you see both, because the human person is so beautiful as Christ made him. But you saw that in this movie, so that was one of my concerns. My second concern, probably my biggest concern of the movie, was James Faulkner as Paul. When I saw the trailer, that wasn't my original vision of what Paul looked like. It was just hard for me to get that. Dr. Hahn, though, he was on the panel at Franciscan. He was like, I really liked him. I'm like, okay, you know St. Paul way more than I do. You know, I'm gonna trust, but I'm nervous about this. But you know, where Paul was in his life, it fit how they portrayed him. And at a certain point, roughly 75% of the way through the movie, there was a particular scene I just looked at. I was just like, that's Paul. That's Paul. But like one of the things that struck me the most about that was what you were saying of like they showed these characters, and something I think we don't think about often is how much Paul suffered from the persecutions that he put on. You know, at a certain point he was like kind of crying about it. Like he had tears in his eyes.
He was having bad dreams and stuff. He was
flashbacks.
Yeah, flashbacks.
You know, he was having bad dreams about it. He was, you know, and even when it goes to the flashback of him at the time when he, you know, in the scriptures when he was blind, you know, has him like, you know, for 3 days he was blind. You know, and just had to, he could do nothing at that point. Like, it makes you think about the scripture. Basically, the movie made me think about the scripture of like, yeah, like, think about it for a second. It wasn't like, oh, I'm blind now. I don't know what to do. Oh, now I'm healed. I'm excited. Let's go preach the gospel. It was so much more like, he's been blinded.
And that blindness,
and
like,
for
that
3
was his
days,
conversion, right? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
He was blind for 3 days. He had to sit there in total darkness and just have to sit there only with what he had just done, realizing all the suffering, all the pain he had just caused, all the death he had just initiated. He had to sit with that. He had to suffer with that. And then to come with his conversion, yeah, he has regret over that like crazy. And that was so well shown in this movie. But then just for him to go out and do that stuff, being like, I do this, you know, I think of these people and I do this for that, like that emotion behind it, like that was something so beautiful in this film.
I think it's also powerful too, especially for people who might have, you know, sinful pasts, who have had like strong conversions or reversions to the faith. It shows the healing that was portrayed, you know, that he had to, how doing work for Christ and for his church was able to heal him, and how Christ still, even though he still, like I said, had the flashbacks and he still struggled with it, he didn't let it get the best of him. He knew that Christ was using him for a greater good, and that where sin abounds, where his sin abounded, grace abounded more. And that's really powerful for people who, like I said, who might have just bad pasts, and they think, like, they struggle with the thought that they're irredeemable, that they're not loved, or that they can't be loved, or something like that. So that's something that I pulled from that part as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally agree with you, and I think James Faulkner sold that. The part that didn't sell me on that was the cinematography, and the reason why is because when he's having those nightmares or those scenes, they're using the exact same shot over and over.
I did see the repetition.
That's fair.
And I was just like...
Yeah.
For the most part, the cinematography was really good, but you do have a point.
Yeah, and I was just like...
It did kind of feel like, oh, that's a reused shot. Like, it took me out of it just the slightest bit.
Yeah, and like... There were some moments where I was just like, okay, you could have used a different angle or like...
Same
something.
Scenario, just different, just to mix it up so it doesn't feel like, oh, you just copied and pasted.
Yeah, because that's what I was worried that they were doing. It's like, let's try to like save time.
Yeah.
Right. So that was with Paul's dreams and flashbacks. Some of them looked like they were just like the same scene again, pasted in there.
Yeah.
But the acting of it was really like what sold me on it, and like even like young Paul was like he sold me on it, and then old Paul, like you felt the hurt in there. I wish that the rest of the team, because this is a production team, saw what they were doing, and they had to because they were editing it. But I just wish they were just like, let's try to up our game somehow. film.
Yeah, I think they were really looking to do was to reiterate, what they had already kind of shown before, and maybe they thought the best way to do that was to reuse the same scenes, and maybe if we just reuse the same clips, maybe they didn't have the time or budget or whatever to reshoot the thing. So I don't know, but I agree with you. I'm just saying, that might have been why.
Yeah, but it's still the problem with that is those scenes happen almost back to back to back. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing that same scene within 15 minutes of each other. Mm-hmm. So I get that they're trying to show us that he feels guilty about it, mm-hmm. but there are other ways to show us that he does without... And I guess, they were limited in the fact that, there were location and, it's boring to have him say, I feel guilty about it, but, it's a visual medium, and we notice things about the... Like you said, I'm not the only one who noticed it. Mm-hmm. So, and I was actually looking for it. And so if someone who was just watching the movie was able to notice that, mm-hmm. so it kind of said something about the film.
Yeah,
a very tiny thing.
Yeah, from a filmmaker standpoint. Yeah, for sure. Just a little criticism, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Other than that, the actors in the movie, I really felt a Christian companionship with these martyrs and these early Christians that were thousands of years ago. And yet I felt so close to them, and I felt that same, not that same, I mean, I wasn't under the Roman, cruel rulership of the time, mm-hmm. or anything, but their faith and their hope, and what they were fighting for and fighting to preserve, mm-hmm. was something I could take into my own heart today, to remember to do everything I can to help preserve the church in ways that it might be slacking in different areas. And even if the church is quote unquote on fire, some people really panic about the church these days. They think this is wrong and this is wrong and this is off and the people inside are corrupt. What are we going to do? It's the martyrs show us you do not abandon a burning building. Yeah. You go down with the ship, and defend the church with your last breath, which was an amazing feeling. And I tried to apply that to my faith life today, in the church today, that same unrelenting fight that you put up for the Church of Christ, the true church, no matter what is going on. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I loved the characters. I really felt a connection with them a lot.
They felt more real, and my actual favorite scene, and it took me a second to realize what my favorite scene was, but it's when, and it's, I don't want to go too into it, but it's when Luke and Paul are together, and they're just having a conversation about Luke singing.
Mm-hmm. And about St. Peter snoring.
Yeah, and I just love it because it showed, it was just a small moment, and it was showing these people as people. Mm-hmm. And so, it made it seem more realistic than, I'm going to use another comparison, a show, The Shepherd, where they were trying to be okay, not that much has changed from the time of the birth of Jesus Christ to nowadays, and people still make similar jokes and similar things, but it felt forced. Here it felt yes, I can see myself having this exact conversation with one of my friends. So it felt more natural, and here I was able to believe, okay, maybe some things has not changed, people's interactions.
Yeah,
for sure. And it kind of reminded me, if you've ever read The Death of Socrates, where the topics are, follow philosophy and life lessons and wisdom most of the time, but then come in these just real conversations of day-to-day life in the middle of it. So that was cool when Luke's talking with Paul in the cell. Yeah. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. But overall, would you all recommend this movie? Let's start with Mark. Because Mark's next to me.
I would say I would recommend it to certain people. If you are excited about seeing this movie, you will like this movie. If you are a Jim Caviezel fan, it's really upsetting that he doesn't get much more work because he's a talented actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
If you are at all interested in this movie, yes, I would recommend it. Just be aware of the brutality and the raw nature of it. Mm-hmm. Just mentally prepare yourself for it, because you might you might cry during it.
Just a little bit.
But I would not recommend it to families.
No, it's not a Friday night movie night with the kiddos.
No.
And so, yeah, I'm not... Yeah, it's a very difficult movie for me to recommend.
Yeah, so with our latest rating system we have here, let's try this. So would you put it in... Here's the 3 categories: Paradiso, Purgatorio, or Inferno. And we know Inferno has about, what? How many circles?
9
they all have 9 circles.
They all have 9 circles. Okay, yes. And so if you would rate it from Paradiso to Inferno, where do you think you would put that?
I'd probably put it in Purgatory.
In Purgatorio.
Really?
In the middle of Purgatory, at the top or the bottom?
I'd probably put it near the top, like near Paradiso. Okay. But it's still, there was so much of it that... Like, there was a lot of good and bad to it, in my opinion. Or a lot of things that I liked, but seriously, the brutality of it really turned me away from it.
Took it down a little.
Yeah, so I have a hard time recommending it to people. But with that being said, if you, you know what you would want to watch. So, yeah.
I can do with you what you did to me with I Can Only Imagine. What is wrong with you?
Oh, no.
This was not a feel-good movie.
But that doesn't make... Never mind.
Joe, here's my meter.
Okay. On a scale, as far as from a theological perspective, I give it a 10. It was amazing. As far as from a technical perspective, I would give it a 9. Like you were saying with the cinematography, cinematography was great for the most part. That one part, I also found the beginning of the movie was a little hard to get into. I was like, okay, what? So I'd dock it a little bit for that. So I give it a 9 out of 10. As far as on the
Paradiso
Inferno scale, I have it in Paradiso.
Top or bottom?
I have it towards the top. I'm gonna put it in the 7th or 8th circle of Paradiso. Nice. Not quite at the 9th circle, just because, again, of those few technical difficulties, that 9th circle is just near perfection, basically, and this was really close to that.
9th circle is if he hits his head and has a vision of heaven, and then the 9th circle. This
is really, and maybe after a second watch, maybe I would put it for sure in that 8th and maybe in that 9th. But on a first watch, I put it 6th or 7th.
All right. Tristan?
Yeah, I'll put it in Paradiso. I'll put it probably at 5th. It's a 5th circle. I did like it. It's not something that I'm super ultra passionate about. Whoa, this was just life changing or anything. But it was a very good movie, very good story, very well told. So yeah.
Great, and I think I would put it in the 7th circle of Paradiso, obviously.
Hey, 7 circle buddies.
Yes, 7 circle buddies for sure. Yeah, and I'm so curious to see how many other people will have a great reaction to this movie. How many people will have, mixed review of the movie and might be too affected by the violence in it, or it'll change their lives. Yeah. I just want to know how it affects those people, but those people have to watch the movie in order to see how it affects them. And I believe there's going to be a lot of people greatly affected by it, so I'm going to highly recommend the movie.
Yeah. I'm curious for you guys watching this, go out, see the movie, and come back here and comment below what
Please do.
You do our rating system. So Paradiso, Purgatorio, or Inferno, and then what circle? Because I'm curious.
Yes, we want to know what the discussion is like.
Let me know if I'm being too rough on it.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us again for another New Catholic Generation movie review, and this time it was the movie Paul, and we all recommend that you see it with some caution in mind due to the violence. So thank you for watching, and come back again for another video here at New Catholic Generation. God bless.
Bye.